The courtroom was alive with a tension that felt almost tangible, the kind that makes every heartbeat echo louder than usual. The hum of the air conditioning was the only constant, a subtle undertone beneath the sharp clicks of camera shutters that punctuated the otherwise hushed room. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the front, where Justice William Alsup leaned forward, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. It was a smirk that carried a quiet arrogance, a confidence born of years spent in positions of power, a belief that authority alone could silence any challenge. But across from him, Jasmine Crockett stood poised, her gaze steady, every movement deliberate, exuding a calm strength that demanded attention without even trying. The gallery seemed to hold its breath. Reporters shifted in their seats, adjusting lenses and microphones, yet none dared break the silence that had fallen over the room. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind of suspense that makes history feel like it is unfolding in real time. Every whisper, every shuffle of paper, every click of a pen felt magnified, as if the room itself recognized the gravity of the moment. And then the smirk, sharp, knowing, flickered across Alsup's face, a subtle provocation meant to unsettle, to assert dominance before a word was even spoken. Crockett's eyes met his, unwavering. There was no hesitation, no faltering. She seemed to inhale the tension and convert it into an almost palpable aura of quiet power. The contrast could not have been more stark. On one side, the seasoned figure whose confidence bordered on cockiness. On the other, a rising force, disciplined, precise, and radiating the kind of integrity that could not be easily shaken. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the intensity, freezing it into what would soon become an image replayed countless times on news feeds, in social media threads, and in the minds of those watching from home. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The room held its breath, the world outside the courtroom forgotten, as if all existence had funneled into this single confrontation. And in that silence, a thought hung in the air. Whatever was about to emerge from Crockett's lips would not merely respond, it would redefine the space, challenge the power, and leave a mark that could ripple far beyond the walls of the courthouse. It was a moment suspended on the edge of revelation, where anticipation itself became a character, alive and insistent. Then, just as quickly as the room had stilled, a tension-charged energy began to pulse, like the sudden beat of a drum before a storm. Every eye waited, every camera lens focused, every mind straining to predict what was coming. And in the corner of every consciousness, the same unspoken question lingered. How would she respond to the smirk that dared to belittle her presence, to underestimate the force about to be unleashed? It was a look, a pause, a charged prelude. The gallery had no idea, but the moment had already begun to etch itself into history. What she was about to say would stun him and the nation, and nothing in that courtroom, or beyond, would ever feel quite the same again.
Outside the courtroom, the world was already watching. Live streams flickered across phones, tablets, and laptops, connecting millions to a chamber that, until now, might have seemed distant, sterile, and removed from daily life. But today, it was anything but ordinary. This was no routine proceeding. Every word, every gesture, every pause carried weight far beyond the legal matter at hand. What unfolded here would not only influence a single case, but would resonate as a symbol of a larger, deeper battle. The struggle between entrenched power and a rising wave of reformist energy demanding accountability, justice, and dignity. Justice Alsup represented the old guard, a figure whose reputation had been built on precedent, tradition, and a steadfast adherence to authority. His career was marked by years of experience, yes, but also by a tendency to favor the familiar, the predictable, and the hierarchies that preserved the status quo. Opposite him stood Jasmine Crockett. Not merely a lawyer, but a rising force defined by courage, clarity, and conviction. She embodied a new era, an era where the voices of the marginalized, the immigrant, and the determined demanded to be heard. The clash was more than legal. It was ideological, symbolic, almost mythic in its implications. Past incidents had hinted at Crockett's resolve. She had faced courtroom dismissals, public skepticism, and the subtle, often unseen pressures that accompany challenging established power. Yet each obstacle had honed her, sharpened her arguments, and built a reputation as someone unshakable in the face of arrogance. Alsup, by contrast, carried the confidence of decades of influence, a track record that could intimidate even the most seasoned opponent. But Crockett's presence was different. She did not merely respond, she commanded, she reframed, she challenged. And today, every observer knew this was the kind of confrontation that could not be ignored. The public's eyes were glued to their screens, and the stakes were mounting. Social media feeds buzzed with commentary, speculation, and viral clips from previous hearings. Analysts debated, influencers weighed in, and citizens from all walks of life recognized that they were witnessing something exceptional, a moment that transcended law and entered the territory of cultural reckoning. The question lingering in every mind was simple but electrifying. Who would emerge, not just victorious in argument, but as the embodiment of justice, of dignity, of truth? And yet, despite the millions already watching, no one had any idea what was about to happen. The tension that had built in the courtroom, the quiet poise of Crockett, the subtle arrogance of Alsup, all of it was a prelude. What was coming would ignite conversations across living rooms, offices, and social media timelines alike. Viewers had no idea this hearing was about to go viral.
Outside the courtroom, the world was already watching. Live streams flickered across phones, tablets, and laptops, connecting millions to a chamber that until now might have seemed distant, sterile, and removed from daily life. But today, it was anything but ordinary. This was no routine proceeding. Every word, every gesture, every pause carried weight far beyond the legal matter at hand. What unfolded here would not only influence a single case, but would resonate as a symbol of a larger, deeper battle. The struggle between entrenched power and a rising wave of reformist energy demanding accountability, justice, and dignity. Justice Alsup represented the old guard, a figure whose reputation had been built on precedent, tradition, and a steadfast adherence to authority. His career was marked by years of experience, yes, but also by a tendency to favor the familiar, the predictable, and the hierarchies that preserved the status quo. Opposite him stood Jasmine Crockett, not merely a lawyer, but a rising force defined by courage, clarity, and conviction. She embodied a new era, an era where the voices of the marginalized, the immigrant, and the determined demanded to be heard. The clash was more than legal. It was ideological, symbolic, almost mythic in its implications. Past incidents had hinted at Crockett's resolve. She had faced courtroom dismissals, public skepticism, and the subtle, often unseen pressures that accompany challenging established power. Yet each obstacle had honed her, sharpened her arguments, and built a reputation as someone unshakable in the face of arrogance. Alsup, by contrast, carried the confidence of decades of influence, a track record that could intimidate even the most seasoned opponent. But Crockett's presence was different. She did not merely respond, she commanded, she reframed, she challenged. And today, every observer knew this was the kind of confrontation that could not be ignored. The public's eyes were glued to their screens, and the stakes were mounting.
Social media feeds buzzed with commentary, speculation, and viral clips from previous hearings. Analysts debated, influencers weighed in, and citizens from all walks of life recognized that they were witnessing something exceptional, a moment that transcended law and entered the territory of cultural reckoning. The question lingering in every mind was simple but electrifying. Who would emerge not just victorious in argument, but as the embodiment of justice, of dignity, of truth? And yet, despite the millions already watching, no one had any idea what was about to happen. The tension that had built in the courtroom, the quiet poise of Crockett, the subtle arrogance of Alsup, all of it was a prelude. What was coming would ignite conversations across living rooms, offices, and social media timelines alike. Viewers had no idea this hearing was about to go viral.
Jasmine Crockett's journey had never been about shortcuts or easy victories. She grew up in neighborhoods where opportunity was scarce, where systemic barriers often seemed insurmountable, and where the weight of expectation could crush the faint-hearted. From an early age, she watched her community struggle, felt their frustrations, and internalized their hope. Every setback she witnessed became a lesson, every challenge a call to action. These formative experiences did more than shape her worldview. They forged a resilience that would define her approach to law, politics, and public service. Her education was hard-won. Scholarships, late nights poring over casebooks, and relentless dedication became the foundation for a career built on merit and perseverance. She faced moments when the odds seemed stacked against her, being underestimated, dismissed, or patronized in spaces dominated by those who had never walked in her shoes. But each obstacle strengthened her resolve, teaching her that preparation, clarity of thought, and unshakable integrity were not optional. They were essential tools for survival and success. Every challenge honed her ability to listen, to analyze, and to respond with precision and authority. Jasmine Crockett's professional trajectory mirrored her personal ethos. She devoted herself to public service, not as a title to wield, but as a responsibility to uphold. Advocating for the underserved, navigating complex legal systems to protect the rights of her constituents, and challenging entrenched power structures became her calling. Her reputation was built not on rhetoric alone, but on action and results, securing victories that mattered, even when they were unpopular or inconvenient to those in power. Each case she argued, each policy she supported, was another brick in the foundation of credibility and courage she carried into every courtroom. And yet, beneath the skill and strategy, there was a human story that resonated with countless Americans, one of sacrifice, perseverance, and unyielding commitment to justice. She had juggled long nights, personal doubts, and the pressures of public scrutiny, but never allowed them to define her. Each struggle had been a rehearsal for the moment she faced now, a high-stakes confrontation with a figure whose confidence threatened to overshadow the very truth he was meant to uphold. As she straightened her posture and fixed her gaze on Justice Alsup, the audience could feel it. This was a woman who had been forged in fire, tempered by struggle, and polished by relentless dedication. Every setback, every long night, every sacrifice had prepared her for this moment. She was ready, not just to respond, but to command, to clarify, and to dismantle arrogance with the quiet force of someone who had never doubted the righteousness of her mission. The calm confidence she radiated was no accident. It was the cumulative result of years of preparation, struggle, and unwavering purpose. And in the charged silence of the courtroom, that confidence was about to meet its ultimate test.
The chamber fell silent, a collective breath held in anticipation of the first words that would break the fragile tension. Justice Alsup began, his voice measured, but edged with impatience, each syllable carrying the subtle weight of authority. "Counsel," he said, leaning forward,
"Let's keep this brief and to the point." The smirk lingered, a small but deliberate provocation. It was a tone he had perfected over decades, a mixture of dismissiveness and superiority meant to unsettle even the most confident opponent. Crockett responded with calm precision, her voice clear, steady, and unwavering. She laid out her argument methodically, each point deliberate, supported by evidence that was impossible to dismiss. Yet every few sentences Alsup interjected, cutting across her rhythm with questions designed to interrupt, to provoke, to test her composure. The gallery shifted uncomfortably. Staffers glanced at one another, some gasping at the sharpness of his interruptions. Cameras clicked rapidly, capturing the tension, the subtle exchange of power, the emotional stakes of each word. It was in these moments, the clipped interruptions, the serene yet assertive responses, and the barely contained tension in the gallery, that the power dynamic began to shift. The smirk that had defined Alsup's confidence appeared slightly strained, a subtle tremor of uncertainty in the corner of his eye. Crockett's poised counterpoints did more than rebut. They exposed a pattern, highlighted contradictions, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, chipped away at the veneer of dominance. And then, in the hush that followed her final carefully measured point, came a remark, brief, almost casual, but loaded with precision and unflinching clarity, that would change everything. A statement so potent that it caused even the most composed staffers to freeze, eyes widening, whispers barely contained. The chamber seemed to lean in collectively, as if time itself recognized that what was about to unfold could redefine the encounter entirely.
Crockett inhaled slowly, letting the weight of the room settle around her. The hum of the air conditioning, the muted clicking of cameras, even the faint shuffle of papers all faded into a tense, expectant silence. Every eye in the courtroom was on her, every ear straining for what would come next. She paused, letting the moment stretch, allowing the anticipation to mount. It was a deliberate beat, a small gesture that magnified the gravity of what she was about to say. The gallery seemed to lean forward collectively, as if drawn into the calm before a storm. Then, with deliberate clarity, she spoke. Her words cut through the tension with precision, each phrase meticulously chosen to dismantle the assumptions Alsup had brought into the room. She referenced cases, precedent, and irrefutable evidence, weaving them together into an argument that was both elegant and devastatingly effective. As she spoke, Alsup's expression shifted almost imperceptibly at first. His smirk tightened, a fleeting glance downward, a subtle furrow of the brow. But Crockett didn't pause. She maintained eye contact, her voice unwavering, confident, and commanding. Every pause she allowed was strategic. A slight tilt of the head, a moment's silence, and the room collectively absorbed the weight of her words. The audience's reactions were instantaneous, gasps from staffers, murmurs of admiration, even restrained applause that could not be contained entirely. On live streams, viewers began commenting furiously, hashtags trending in real time as snippets of her statements were shared, replayed, dissected. The courtroom, once tense and rigid, now felt electrified, charged with the force of truth meeting arrogance. Alsup tried to interject, his usual composure faltering. His gestures became sharper, more clipped, his words attempting to regain control, but the momentum had already shifted. Crockett's delivery was relentless, yet controlled, her evidence landing with the authority of someone who had anticipated every counterargument. Each point she made exposed inconsistencies. Each carefully measured rebuttal chipped away at the narrative Alsup had relied upon for decades. The contrast between her calm precision and his growing agitation was undeniable, and the spectators could sense the imbalance, the inevitability of her triumph. The culmination was cinematic, a final, pointed statement delivered with the calm certainty of someone whose preparation had left no gaps, echoed through the chamber. Silence followed, thick, almost suffocating, as if the room itself were absorbing the impact.
Then, like a dam breaking, applause erupted. Staffers, spectators, even some who had initially sided with Alsup reacted instinctively, their voices blending with the hum of online engagement. Tweets, clips, and comments exploded across platforms, capturing the moment as Crockett's words reverberated far beyond the courthouse walls. In that charged silence and the eruption that followed, it was clear. The takedown was complete. Crockett had not only countered, she had redefined the power dynamic entirely. And as the cameras continued to click and live streams buzzed with excitement, an unspoken truth hung in the air. The moment was historic, and its reverberations were only just beginning.
Within minutes of Crockett's words landing, the courtroom scene had exploded beyond its walls. Social media feeds ignited with trending hashtags, each one capturing a different angle of her argument. Hashtag Crockett clapback, hashtag justice served, hashtag courtroom moment. Memes and short clips proliferated, edited for dramatic effect, captions highlighting her composure and Alsup's faltering expressions. Influencers stitched her rebuttal, pausing at every impactful line, dissecting her precision for millions of viewers hungry for clarity, inspiration, and proof that dignity could triumph over arrogance. Celebrity commentators weighed in almost immediately. Political analysts, late-night hosts, and journalists replayed the exchange in slow motion, marveling at the orchestration of logic and presence. One tweet from a prominent figure read, "Crockett just redefined courtroom confidence. Every law student should study this moment." Another influencer posted a side-by-side comparison of Alsup's smirk with Crockett's unshakable calm, framing it as a visual metaphor for the shift in power dynamics. Comments flooded in, a blend of astonishment, admiration, and energized debate. Even casual viewers who had tuned in on a whim found themselves captivated, sharing clips with captions that radiated pride, hope, and a renewed faith in justice. Yet not everyone responded with awe. Detractors scrambled to justify, downplay, or redirect the narrative. Editorial columns sprang up dissecting her tone, legal purism, and her approach, while some conservative commentators tried to recast the exchange as overblown. The contrast was stark: excitement, admiration, and inspiration on one side, defensive rationalization and frustration on the other. The courtroom's tension had metastasized into a public spectacle, a national conversation no one could ignore. The ripple effect extended far beyond digital chatter. Civic organizations began referencing the exchange as an example of integrity under pressure. Law schools and advocacy groups highlighted her technique as a teaching moment. Community leaders shared clips in meetings and forums, using it to inspire the next generation to engage with law, justice, and public service. Every retweet, repost, and viral clip reinforced the sense that this was not a moment to be contained. It was a turning point, a signal that courage, preparation, and clarity could ripple outward, influencing discussions, shaping perceptions, and energizing movements across the country. And while the courtroom itself had returned to procedural normalcy, the echoes of that confrontation resonated everywhere. Alsup's smirk, once a symbol of confident dominance, now felt fragile, almost vulnerable. Crockett's composure had transcended a single rebuttal. It had become a statement that could not be erased, a historic moment replayed in tweets, threads, and headlines. The nation, in real time, was watching, reacting, and remembering.
As the echoes of applause and the hum of online virality settled, Jasmine Crockett did something remarkable. She transformed the moment from a mere courtroom victory into a lesson in dignity and principle. Her voice, calm yet unwavering, reframed the confrontation not as a personal triumph, but as a demonstration of universal truths. Facts, integrity, and steadfast commitment to justice could outshine arrogance, ego, and posturing every time. The courtroom had witnessed more than argument. It had witnessed the embodiment of accountability meeting authority, clarity confronting overconfidence, and truth prevailing in the face of intimidation.
In her closing words, Crockett emphasized that democracy was not a distant ideal, but a living practice, one that required vigilance, courage, and active participation. Public service, she reminded the audience, was not a privilege reserved for the few. It was a responsibility, a calling, and a duty to uphold values larger than oneself. Her statements resonated far beyond the chamber, reaching communities, classrooms, and living rooms across the nation. For those who had long felt marginalized or overlooked, there was a surge of validation. Dignity could command attention. Preparation and principle could bend even the most rigid systems toward justice. The contrast between her composure and Alsup's faltering confidence crystallized into a lesson that could not be ignored. It was a reminder that authority alone did not guarantee respect, that experience alone did not ensure moral clarity. The crowd, the viewers online, and even the commentators dissecting the moment could see that what mattered most was the courage to stand firm, to act with integrity, and to speak truth clearly and without fear. In that sense, Crockett's triumph was both individual and collective, a symbol of what could be achieved when one embraced responsibility, preparation, and unwavering principles. And yet, beyond the immediate victory, there was a sense of momentum building, a turning tide in how accountability, justice, and public service could be perceived and enacted. The moment hinted at larger change, a cultural and civic awakening fueled by courage and clarity. Americans watching were left with a renewed sense of hope, a call to reflect on their own values, and the inspiration to engage with society not passively, but with purpose and confidence. Crockett had not just won a debate, she had illuminated a path forward, proving that dignity, fact, and moral courage could redefine not only a courtroom, but the very ideas we hold about fairness, justice, and the future of public service.
This wasn't just one moment in a courtroom. It was a turning point in how we hold power accountable. Jasmine Crockett's composure, clarity, and courage had done more than win an argument. They had sparked a conversation that reverberated across the nation. It was proof that standing firm in truth, armed with preparation and integrity, could challenge even the most entrenched authority. The courtroom had become a stage for justice, and the lessons learned there belonged to everyone watching. Now, the story continues beyond the cameras and headlines. Every retweet, every share, every conversation sparked by this moment amplifies its impact. By engaging, spreading awareness, and discussing these ideas, viewers become part of a movement, not just spectators, but participants in shaping a society where dignity and accountability triumph over arrogance and indifference. Subscribe to follow more moments where courage meets conviction. Share this story with friends, family, and colleagues. Let it inspire discussions about justice, public service, and the power of speaking truth to authority. Your engagement ensures that moments like this are not isolated. They become catalysts for change. Together, we honor those who stand for what is right, encourage those who are rising to meet challenges, and remind the world that integrity cannot be silenced. This isn't just a courtroom drama. It's a blueprint for holding power accountable, and every voice matters in carrying it forward.